Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
I do a hell of a lot of hiking and camping up in the Alberta Rockies, specifically around Upper Kananaskis Lake and the Ghost Public Land Use Zone. Up at Three Isle Lake, I once saw with my brother and a friend what's sometimes called a jumper. We're coming down after having breakfast and packing up our camp, and this guy in a blue jacket comes sprinting past us. We thought nothing of it since plenty of people run the trails instead of camping like us. As we come around a bend, we get a straight view down the path to the cliff. There's this one really tall cliff that we have to scramble up a steep and tightly switchbacking trail to get up and down. It's as steep as a trail is allowed to get before requiring climbing gear. This guy sprints right off the cliff edge and keeps making running motions as he falls like it's nothing. We searched for over an hour and found absolutely no sign of a body from the top or bottom of the cliff. When we reported it to the park rangers on the way home, they seemed spooked as hell but didn't do anything or seem concerned with going up there to look. I've since found out these jumpers are weird apparition things that are actually fairly common. There's plenty of reports of them in the Canadian and US Rockies and other mountain ranges. You see some guy climbing a cliff face in the distance, or hiking a separate ridge, or passing you on the trail without you noticing many details, and then they casually hurl themselves off the cliff, sometimes contorting bizarrely or giving you some weird sign first. There will be reports of the same jumper on the same or very close cliffs throwing himself off over and over again, spanning years or decades, and park guys learn which jump reports to ignore fairly quickly. I've also been called to in the forest. Up in the Ghost, my second or third time up there, my brother and I were camping in the back of my dad's truck waiting for the rain to pass or for it to get dark enough to sleep. Through the wind and rain, we start to hear a weird noise that sounds like a woman screaming. We look at each other like WTF and listen closer, and realize she's screaming a name. The screwed up thing is, when we talked to each other we realized we each heard her screaming our own names. He heard his, I heard mine at the same time. Beyond that, no one was supposed to be up there that knew us. Nope, we stayed awake till the rain stopped and the screaming died out at the same time, cradling my shotgun. We didn't sleep much at all that night, and noped out of there early the next morning. I've been told it was probably a fox or a cougar, but trust me, I know what both of those sound like and they don't scream names. The Ghost itself is kind of a messed up area in itself. The Ghost Valley, or the Devil's Gap Valley as it's sometimes known, is a weird place with a bunch of spiritual significance to the nearby Stony Nakota people. It's named after one of the mountains there, the Devil's Head. The story goes that because it's shaped so weirdly, Stony people said that it was where the spirits cross over and try to collect their own. It's a weird-looking mountain that about halfway up turns into a vertical column ending in a nearly flat top. There's other similarly shaped mountains elsewhere in the North American Rockies with similar reputation, such as the Devil's Tower in Wyoming. It's also really good hunting territory and a natural gateway up into the Rockies from the foothills, so the Stony and many other tribes have fought over it many times. On the right kind of night, you can see spirits climb down off the cliffs and pick over the stones of the riverbed looking for the bones of fallen warriors. I've never been out there on the right kind of night, so I can neither confirm nor deny this. However, basically any time I've been up there, everything I did felt a little off. There's this sense you're being watched a lot of the time, and other times it's more like something wants to hurt you, or if you do something, no matter how carefully, the worst case scenario is going to happen and you're going to hurt yourself doing it. It's a weird sensation. I also saw a weird-ass disappearing tree up there in a dead zone. So I was hiking this random little trail in the Ghost. There's thousands and thousands up there with no markings or planning, and I came up to a clearing. Another one of those weird things people see pretty often wandering about in the woods is when everything suddenly or gradually goes dead quiet. I notice everything is silent, and as I look around, the light has a weird quality to it. I remember the rocks and trees and shape of the clearing well. In the middle of the clearing is this squat tree, super huge around but looks like it was broken off only 10 feet up or so. No sign of where the top went. It's got all these gnarled branches all the way up, which is weird because conifers typically lose their lower branches in this area because there's no light lower down once they get tall. The bark was kind of sort of healthy-ish, again weird because the rest of it looks dead and it has no needles to speak of. I take all this in, and then back out of the area at a controlled pace because you don't stick around when you wander into one of these silent spots. As I back out and get around a couple turns, the light goes back to normal and I start to hear birds and bugs again. I found a different fork and followed it around for a while before going back to my campsite. I returned a couple weeks later to the same campsite with a buddy of mine, and after doing some shooting we decided to take a hike. I asked my buddy if he wanted to see something weird. He said hell yes, so I tried going back. I took that same trail and tried to find the weird tree. I found the clearing after a while, same shape, same rocks, same trees, except the weird tree in the middle was gone, no sign it was ever there. No weird silence or light either, just a normal clearing. I know it was the right trail and the right clearing, but that tree was not there. Not that interesting or spooky, but it was more than a little disturbing. We just ended up going back to shooting after a while.
Someone shared this story with me via DM. I saved it in a text file. We'll share it below. Might be a bit messy, since I'll be sifting through it to keep only the relevant details. Maybe some of you will find it as interesting as I did. Summer of 2020. This happened to me and my friends, Trevor, Chad, and Paul. A legit Eagle Scout survivalist type. We'd all just graduated high school. This was back during the lockdown, and to be honest, we all just wanted to escape for a week and decided to rent a cabin together in the Chattahoochee National Forest. Bigfoot territory. We spent weeks prepping, getting food, organizing schedules, and just generally planning. The cabin was 2 stories. You had the main floor where we slept and a staircase that went to a second story. Up there you had a living space with a wall that separated the room from the stairs, so you couldn't see anything but could hear when someone was walking up. There was also a bathroom that was out of eyesight, also important later. Lastly, across from the cabin was a large stream. As soon as we entered the cabin, something felt off. We mentioned it almost immediately to each other, but we brushed it off and settled down for the night. We woke up the next morning to Paul asking if anyone had heard a dog during the night. We hadn't. He told us that he heard growling either in the corner of the first floor or just outside of the cabin. There wasn't a house anywhere near us for a good while, but we just chalked it up to a neighbor's dog. Later that day, Chad and I went tubing down the creek, where we both saw and heard figures moving in the woods just outside of our periphery. We heard twigs breaking and that sort of thing. Once again, we ignored it, assuming maybe it was hunters, and paddled home. Wake up the next morning and Chad is looking disturbed. He confided in me that he had woken up the previous night and seen the shadow of a dog at the end of his bed, growling. He said he just closed his eyes and prayed it was a sleep paralysis scenario and tried to pass out. I think we were all on edge that morning because Chad suggested going into a nearby town and everyone agreed right away, like they were also eager to get out of the cabin for a bit. But when we got back, the weirdness just continued to ramp up. At one point we all heard what sounded like one of the curtains being ripped off the windows, and sure enough we found a curtain not removed, but torn and tattered, lying on the ground. Since this happened on the first floor, we moved ourselves upstairs. When we reached the second floor, Trevor said he'd turned back and seen something downstairs that looked like a shadow watching them. Needless to say, soon after that we all decided to just bail on the cabin. The weirdness never let up. At one point we all heard an audible growl in the room with us and decided we'd had enough.
I was on a teen camp expedition in Alberta, Canada to spelunk some local caves, when we decided to move off the beaten path and search another cave. It was very tight. We had to literally force ourselves inside. Once we got in, we walked through the cave for about 1 kilometer until we reached the end where there was a flat wall. At the base of the wall, and up a steep slope, there was a 1 meter by 1 meter hole in the wall. I was the skinniest, so I volunteered to investigate. I put on the camp leader's headlamp and got onto my stomach and entered the hole, not able to move my hands more than 15 degrees to the side, and edged my whole body in with my feet. As soon as I got into that hole, I felt a presence watching me. Being a young lad, I ignored it and kept crawling into the hole. I traveled around 3 meters into the hole until there was a sharp left-hand turn. I shone my headlamp down the tunnel to the end and saw a pile of sticks and leaves and a dead end. I went in to take a look, still not able to move my body more than an inch in any direction except for forward. I picked up one of the sticks and realized that it was a human bone. At that moment, without telling anyone what I had seen, someone outside let out an absolutely blood-curdling scream. I backed out of the hole as fast as I could, and my head hit the roof of the cave, turning the lamp off. As soon as the lamp turned off, I saw 2 glowing eyes staring directly into my face. Instantly, 2 hands grabbed my ankles and yanked me out of the hole. We ran. The camp lady would not tell anyone what she had seen, and neither did I, because I didn't want everyone to think I was crazy.
I was asleep one night in November 2006 in my two-bedroom, two-story detached house on the Canadian Forces Base, Cold Lake, Alberta, Canada. At about 1 a.m. I was awakened by two human-looking beings coming from the direction of the window and approaching my bed. One was tall and slender, dressed casually, very neat and clean with an aura that illuminated the room. He had short fair-colored hair and light-colored clothing. He had a Nordic appearance. The light seemed to emanate from behind him and enabled me to see pictures on the wall in a room. The room was normally pitch black at night with the blind pulled down. On this being's right was a shorter, less visible being who didn't have an aura and appeared unkempt, not sure because he was less visible. They were talking to each other as they approached my bed. As they reached the bed, the taller being turned from the shorter being and spoke to me in a calm voice and said,
"Where are the stairs?"
Thinking to myself, where am I and why are there people walking here where I am laying down? I tried to assess the situation. I gestured toward the bedroom door to my left with my left hand in response to his question. They turned toward the door and walked through the closed door, which appeared open or see-through in the aura light, which made even the hallway and stairs visible to me. They continued talking to each other and walked down the stairs, and as they walked, their footsteps and voices faded and the light faded until there was complete darkness and silence. I was left wondering what just happened and wondering if I had left my downstairs house entrance unlocked. I thought to myself, of course I didn't leave it unlocked, and I thought, I'm not going downstairs to follow them. I was a little fearful as I didn't know what these beings were. During the encounter I didn't feel scared. It was only in retrospect I started thinking about what just had happened. I became a little spooked, but not enough to stop me from sleeping. They seemed nice, not angry or mean. I had a similar encounter about a year after when a similar being came through the closed bedroom window again. Again, I think they wanted to know where the stairs were. As they came through the window, they moved to the blind side and popped their head in and looked at me, like he recognized me, then smiled and came in. He approached the bed. There was only one this time. The beings weren't from another era or time period or didn't appear to be.
This was back in the day of no cars for the poor folk in the Appalachians of North Georgia. My great-grandfather's friend was a richer man by poor standards, and thus had a horse. One day he was riding the horse through the state highway, which was a lonely road out in the middle of nowhere. Sun beating down on him during this summer day. The road cut this old farm property in half. On the left side of the road was a barn, and on the right side was the old farmhouse. It had been abandoned several years at that point. And nothing else but tall swaying cornfields. As he's nearing the house he feels a weird, eerie feeling, but he doesn't pause until he hears a baby crying from inside the house. Now, there was no car in the driveway, no open door, no lights on. He deduced that if it was a baby, someone, maybe a young mother on the run or a kidnapper, was hiding out there. Either way, the crying baby made him pull up to the driveway on his horse, tie the horse up, and walk up the walkway. He was halfway up the walkway when the baby stopped. He paused, and then the sound started again. But this time the sound was coming from the barn. Thinking it was just wind currents or something, he strode back down the walkway, and across the highway, leaving his horse, and walked through the corn toward the barn. He was maybe halfway there, looking up and seeing nobody inside yet, when the noise stopped. Then the crying started again, but coming from the house. He bolted back through the corn and onto his horse, and spurted out of the property. The horse had been neighing and stomping, generally acting freaked, which it didn't normally do being an older and gentler horse. The friend told my grandpa that was the only time in that horse's life he'd spurred it, and it actually began to gallop away without any further persuasion.
I had a conversation with a Bigfoot. He speaks in images, but I'm used to that because I think in images and had to learn communication. I didn't speak until I was 5. I'm a weirdo and I'm not afraid of a lot of stuff. I've seen lots of crazy things over the years. Anyway, I was shown that Bigfoots are protectors of ancient facilities, sites, Earth, specific bloodlines of humans and stasis pods, which explains why the nuclear physicist would have been hated and then screwed with. He has been involved in some pretty shady crap, and it's obvious because of the fact that he knows and has experienced Bigfoots entering specific facilities. Bigfoots camouflage a lot because of us, and it's genetic, not technology, caused, and they can naturally affect frequencies, and this is why the hallucination, plus the text. Our phones are all waves, which are frequencies. He showed me that many Bigfoot are sealed into areas long ago, but the beings he was guarding had left about 10 years ago. Also to note, the park up the road where the Bigfoot was that I communicated with, has land owned by none other than Queen Elizabeth. It's her personal property which was gifted to her by our premier in the 1970s when he had also created many parks here in Alberta, Canada. Every park seems to have some weirdness, as you know. Also, there are giant mounds in the park area, but not in the Queen's area. Bigfoot showed me that he didn't go to that area. If you walk all through the park you will see trees ripped up and some upside down. But he lets me forage and leaves me be, no missing time, and my dog is always fine. Many people in the area have seen him. He is alone and many avoid the park because they have bad experiences. Maybe if people were not douches who disrespect nature then they wouldn't have a problem. They are very simple, but they see into you, and if you are immoral then watch out, and that guy is lucky he came back. But clearly they want people to know because they have been making it more obvious why they show up. The government would never be able to see them and they can be right in your home and you would never know. They are pretty powerful creatures who communicate telepathically with images and not words.
Be game warden in New England. Extremely boring. Doing my patrol route. Get a report that some drunk hillbilly was out in the woods firing off all sorts of guns. Had a few dead fawns with him, so guess this is my jurisdiction now. Head out to his location. See him stumbling around near the edge of the woods with an AR-15 in his arms. Blubbering incoherently. Go to announce my presence, guy turns around and sees me. Crooked ass grin spreads across his face. See some kind of figure slowly emerging from the woods behind him. Asshole puckers like it just took a shot of lemon juice when I see a huge hand reach out and grab the redneck. Doesn't even react to it. Gets physically pulled into a tree and absorbed into it. Not like he collided with it, just like he seamlessly slipped into it like it was some kind of jello. Get back in my car and drive tough, report it to my superiors. No one found any trace of the redneck besides the dead deer he left behind, his rifles, and ammo.
Back in around the early 1930s, my granddad was a biplane pilot while his younger brother was in the cavalry. Both Royal Canadian Mounted Police lieutenants at the time, the elder having 2 years seniority over the younger. They were stationed about 60 or 70 miles apart in Canada's northern wilderness. The cavalry brother, Mom's uncle, was in command of a small 30-strong contingent serving the area as paramilitary police force. He said one day the locals came in a group of 3 respected elders to file a complaint of an eerie shrieking sound in the night, and their sheep going missing. So he decided to take a small platoon of 5 Mounties and go to the village where the supposed happenings were taking place to investigate and intervene if need be. They stayed in the village for 3 days without any incident, patrolling the days and staying in the village by night. But the night between the 3rd and 4th day, a young chap came bursting into the village in to tell him that it struck again. So my great-uncle, as I may call him, took 4 of his Mounties, leaving 1 behind for liaison, and rushed to the scene. He and his troops heard the terrible eerie shrieking all right, and unlike the villagers who were huddling with fear, galloped toward the sound, following the military instinct of always go towards the sound of calamity. It was a reasonably moonlit night, and when they approached this rocky area, they saw the culprit. According to the exact description my great-uncle told me,
it was some kind of a bird of prey. Not possible to put a finger on the color due to the light condition, of course, but presumably some fuzzy dark reddish-brown.
It was perched on a rock shelf, and from what he judged was around as tall as me. I was 16 at the time he told me this story, and around 1.81 meters tall at that position. It paid no attention to the cavalry platoon, although the horses had been spooked and were snorting, neighing and shuffling with all the gear of the Mounties clattering due to all that movement, etc. His sergeant offered to shoot the thing and great-uncle agreed, ordering to dismount and fire at will. However, the bird seemingly heard this and took to the sky. He described it as not simply bouncing up into the air and flying away like some sparrow or pigeon. He said it threw itself down from the rock shelf it was perched on to a free fall while spreading its wings and flapping strongly until it gained altitude. He also added it took the creature some considerable effort to rise up and fly. He then estimated the wingspan to be around 3 to 3.5 meters. He said he didn't feel like killing the majestic creature, but since it caused loss of property, he thought of it as duty and ordered fire. He said since the Moser rifles they were equipped with did not fire tracers, so he cannot actually tell how accurate the shots were, but at the end, the bird flew away, disappearing from sight in the dark. But after that night, the sounds and disappearing sheep incident ceased, so they must have seriously wounded it, causing it to eventually succumb, he said.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.